I just finished Volume 7 of High School DxD, and man, it was so good. I was a little skeptical going into it because of Volume 6's Disaster Class, but this volume was a million times better in every way. The story was way better, the characters were so much better. There were like 4 characters that put on a masterclass in this volume, and I'll get to them as we go, of course. The main fight was so good, and even the side fights were really entertaining. There was actual emotion and drama being built, and then the villain, never in my life did I think I would find Loki to actually be intimidating, but he actually was in this volume. This volume put me right back into High School DxD. So just like the last volume review, I'll tell you what happens and then give my commentary on everything. And of course, spoiler alert for Volume 7 if you wanted to read that. So this volume is pretty different from the others. In the other volumes, you have like clear arcs that are being tackled, but this one is like a lot of build up for future arcs, and it's like a lot of mini stories. But the major things we're tackling in this volume are the introduction to the hero faction, Akino's backstory, and Loki. That's essentially what this whole thing's about. For starters, this volume starts off with one of the coldest lines. The first line says, "It means that there are those who find it painful in what you call peace." And that kind of brings up an interesting perspective for all the villains in High School DxD, like the Chaos Brigade and all of them, because up until now I kind of just saw them as a bunch of terrorists. But when Volley says this later in the light novel, it kind of makes you start thinking. The volume starts off with the characters watching the Opie Dragon show that they were doing. Rias has officially become known as the Switch Princess, and Issei is officially the Grabbin' Dragon, or the Opie Dragon. This whole little first scene was pretty funny. We get a really funny moment with Irina. I guess Issei accidentally compliments her, and then she just goes crazy. Her wings start switching from black to white, and then when Azazel sees this, he says that he accepts fallen angels. Definitely one of the funniest moments in this volume. While that's happening, Akino reminds Issei of their date that Issei promised in the last volume after Akino beat Deodora's pieces. And that's also going to be like a little moment that they do. So the kids are back in school now, and they begin planning the trip to Kyoto. And I think I said this in the last volume review, but it's crazy how much planning they do for both the Cyborg and the So-So arcs. Like, these things have been talked about since like volume 5, and they don't happen till what, volume 9 and 10? They're so focused on these 2 arcs that it's actually surprising when Loki shows up, since there's no build at all to him. But while they're planning, it kind of seems like Issei and Asya are becoming closer now because of the Juggernaut Drive moment. And Issei also goes from seeing Asya as a sister to more of like a lover. And it's some nice relationship progression. And it also makes a lot of sense since that whole Juggernaut Drive thing was definitely traumatizing to all of them. So it makes sense that they would be bonding over that. And honestly, it seems like everyone is a lot more protective of Asya. But they pick their groups for the Kyoto trip, and the group that Issei's in consists of the Holy Trio, the Perverted Trio, and Aika Kiryu. So those are the groups that will be in during the So-So arc. Back in the club room, Rias is talking about the trip and the school festival that'll take place after the trip. And while she's talking about that, they get a call and they have to go on like a little mission, kind of like they did for the visor guy. We get into the action really quickly on this volume. I mean, we're only like 15 pages in at this point, but the mission that they have is the kids' first encounter with Conla. You know that random flashback that they show in season 4 that kind of feels out of place and random? Yeah, that's what happens here. So the mission is to take down Conla and his friends. There's Conla, a light bow user, a light flame user, and some other dude that's hidden. We get a nice moment of leadership from Rias, and we get to see a lot of teamwork from everyone else. We get to see their formations, their attack plans, and it's pretty interesting. I really like when they do this. And it also does a good job at keeping that leadership thing up with Rias. Since they're kind of dropping the ball with her strength, at least they can keep her leadership up. It kind of acts as a substitute. The tension in this fight is higher, and the stakes are also a little higher because Issei's power is being limited. If he goes all out, he'll destroy the buildings in the town, so he takes more of a back roll and he kind of holds back. He does learn how to lessen the effect of his dragon shot, which shows his growth as a fighter, so that's pretty nice. And this fight scene overall was pretty good. We get to see everyone fight instead of just Issei, and I would say this is one of the better non-main fights. And also, Conla was a lot more powerful than I expected. And really, the hero faction as a whole is a lot better and smarter than I thought they were. They pretty much know everything about the Grimmery team's powers and abilities because they faced them so many times that they're starting to know their moves. So every time they face them, the battle gets longer and longer. It's pretty interesting, and it also makes the fight with So-So more exciting. And this also makes it make more sense when in season 4, everyone on Issei's team just gets wiped besides Issei by the other people in the hero faction. Because when I first watched that, I was like, bro, this is like terrible. We didn't even get to see them fight. But in this context, it'll make a lot more sense. Rias comes up with a plan to defeat the enemies, and honestly, it's kind of a brilliant plan. One of the abilities of Conla, I think, it might have been someone else, is that he's able to take an attack and redirect it somewhere else. Kind of like Spot from the Spider-Verse. Rias notices this and pretty much instantly thinks of a plan. So Issei shoots a dragon shot at one of the enemies. The shot gets absorbed into the dude's body and is about to get redirected, but before it does, Rias tells Kiba to cut the dragon shot in half, and once it's cut in half, it blows up, and it blows up on the person. Pretty interesting plan, and I really liked it. But there's also another user outside, and Konako ends up taking them out. Issei defeats the fire user inside, and Kiba defeats the other light user, and they all get captured. All that's left was Conla, and he doesn't get captured because he uses his balance breaker, and once he does that, he gets teleported away. So basically, the hero faction is just farming people who use balance breaker. They have a whole bunch of sacred gear users, and they send them out to fight strong people, and fighting strong users correlates to unlocking balance breaker. So if they do unlock balance breaker, then they get to join like the real hero faction, but if they don't, they basically just die if they get captured. It's pretty interesting, and it makes sense because the way Issei unlocked balance breaker was through fighting someone powerful like Kuroka, and even Kiba went balance breaker while fighting Freed and Kokabille. It's a pretty interesting concept, and I think the world building in High School DxD has been amazing so far. It's such an interesting world, and I'm really enjoying how they handle it. The fight's over, and it's revealed that Issei can now use balance breaker for 2 hours, 3 hours if he really tries, and it only takes him 2 minutes to activate his balance breaker because of the Juggernaut drive. So we get a lot of information here. More stuff about Issei's progression and the hero faction's plan. Everybody goes home, and then Akano reminds Issei of their date again, which again is a pretty important moment in this series. But later on, Konako and Issei get together, and Konako is using Senjutsu to heal Issei's lifespan. The Juggernaut drive lowered his lifespan to under 100 years, which is crazy because I think devils live to like 10,000 years. It really puts into perspective how dangerous that Juggernaut drive is. And it makes it make so much more sense when Issei doesn't use the Juggernaut drive against Cyborg, because I mean, he could have ended up dying. This reveal of his lifespan being shortened was also pretty good. Issei was pretty emotional when he said it or when he was talking about it. And again, we also find out Issei cannot go Juggernaut Drive, and he also can't use Divine Dividing because his lifespan will run out, which is something that I have no idea why the anime would leave out. Why wouldn't you tell us that he can't use Divine Dividing? That's like one of the most important things you could have said. But this whole thing just adds a lot more tension to the fight since Issei is a lot more restricted. We get a good little moment of Konako begging Issei to never go Juggernaut Drive again, and the scenes where Issei is one-on-one with a character are the best scenes. It makes you like the character so much more, and it makes you like Issei so much more, because Issei is like the coolest dude ever. He has such a pure heart. And then of course it also makes you want to see more from Issei and that person's relationship. Overall, it was a pretty good scene, and it's pretty interesting thinking that the girls are the ones that have to heal Issei's lifespan. It's time for Issei and Akano's date now, so they go on their date, and for some reason the other characters decided to follow them, and they're in like the dumbest disguises ever. Why is Konako in a wrestler mask, and what is Kiba even doing there? It was actually pretty funny. But mid-date, we get some more Rainier trauma. Issei starts thinking about Akano and how she could have any guy she wants, and for some reason, he just doesn't see Akano ever getting with him. He even gets jealous of the thought of Akano being with someone else. It's honestly kind of impressive how many hints of Rainier's trauma we've gotten so far. The author is so good at this. He's so good at making sure things don't come out of nowhere. Pretty much everything in this series has been explained so far, and it's just been so impressive. But Akano doesn't like the fact that they're being followed, so she takes Issei and runs away with him. They run into the Love Hotel Street, and then Akano wants to go into one of the hotels with Issei, and oh my god, we get like a whole page of Issei just blabbering. He goes on about a whole bunch of nothing. I guess he was really flustered by this, but oh my god, he was just yapping. But before anything happens, Odin and Barkil appears. Barkil tries to grab Akano to get her away from Issei, and Issei tries defending her because he doesn't know that Barkil is Akano's dad. And I think I like this scene more here. I like Issei standing up for Akano because it just makes a lot more sense. They go back to Issei's house, and Akano won't even look at her dad. This whole Akano and Barkil thing was done so well in this volume. It never felt overdone, and it always had me interested no matter when it came up. It was definitely one of my favorite stories being told in this volume, and it might even be my favorite. It's such a sad story, and they do an amazing job at making you want to root for both people. There's no side that you pick here. You feel bad for both Barkil and Akano. Now there was a little nitpick in this scene, and that's when we find out that Barkil is the strongest fallen angel in terms of attack power, and I kinda don't like this. I hate how weak they make the fallen angel seem. I don't want to call Barkil weak, but they need to make someone stronger than Barkil as the strongest fallen angel. I really hate how they're building the fallen angels up, because I think someone like Azazel, I don't think he should be Sir Zex level, but he should be almost at Sir Zex level. He should be like Odin level or something. The fallen angels just come off as so much weaker than the devils. But anyways, Odin was being creepy again, and then Ross Wysa just smacks him in the head. She was a lot more aggressive with him in this volume, which was pretty funny. She introduces herself, and apparently she's the same age as Issei, or a little bit older than him, which again is the biggest lie ever. It just doesn't make sense. There's no reason to make her 19. Wasn't she drinking alcohol with Azazel in season 4? Nothing about her character tells me that she's 19. It's such a strange thing to add. But apparently Odin is there to talk to the Japanese gods, and Sir Zex, Michael, and Azazel are there to mediate it. So the kids, Azazel and Barkil, are assigned to be Odin's bodyguards to protect him from any more terrorist attacks, because they kind of always attack these meetings. And then Odin reveals that the Chaos Brigade are mass producing sacred gears to grow their strength. So it makes even more sense why Odin would need protecting. And while they're talking, we get a funny little moment where Azazel kind of starts reading Issei's mind. And I just love how Azazel knows Issei more than anyone else. Azazel is basically Issei's dad at this point. And speaking of dads, Akeno really hates her dad. So later on, Barkil is talking to Akeno and Issei. And Akeno's talking about how her mom died and how it's Barkil's fault. And it should be an emotional scene, but it kind of gets ruined by Issei's commentary, which is a shame. So Barkil has this misconception that Issei eats breasts, and Issei would not let it go. He just kept going on about how that was a lie or how weird that was, but he was saying it in his head. And this scene just makes me realize that it was such an amazing idea to make the Juggernaut drive scene in someone else's perspective, because I don't think I would be able to take it seriously if it was in Issei's perspective. But yeah, Akeno is really mean to her dad, and it's really sad. Like, it makes you feel so bad for Barkil. But later on, the team is doing an event underworld where they're meeting with kids and fans of the little show that they do. And we see that Issei has become an icon for kids, which is so crazy. We really watched Issei grow up right in front of us. He went from being like this trash kid who could barely use his sacred gear to like an actual idol for a bunch of kids. It's almost sad. Now there is a really weird moment here where this kid pokes Rias's boobs, and I think it's kind of strange how okay these characters are with being sexually assaulted. Issei should have beat that kid up. But overall, this scene was kind of useless. We didn't really get anything from it besides just seeing how much Issei has grown. But it was still entertaining for the most part. So after the event, they all go to the dressing room and we get a little moment between Issei, Rias, and Ravel. And it seems like they're trying to ease us into liking Ravel more, but it's just not working yet. I still need to see a lot more from her before I can take her seriously. They go back home and we get one of my favorite scenes in this volume. Like, this volume hits a completely new level when we get to this point right here. Everything after this is almost perfect. Issei, Kiba, and Gasper are all training, and Issei and Kiba are fighting. And during this fight, Issei still can't beat Kiba. And I love this. I love how they're staying consistent with their whole power types will struggle against counter types. I love how they're still doing that. Plus, it also makes Kiba look really good, which is something they always been able to do really well. I also really love how Issei is thinking while he's fighting. He understands that he can't beat Kiba with Ascalon, so he switches to his fists, and he tries beating Kiba with those. But Kiba is really smart and really fast, so Issei just cannot touch him. And Kiba ends up trapping Issei with an ice sword, and is about to finish him off when we get a pretty nice moment. Issei pulls out his dragon wings and breaks free from the ice. And I didn't even realize it until now, but in the anime, Issei just pulls out his dragon wings out of nowhere. It's so weird. So Issei got these wings because of Juggernaut Drive, but he can't really use them. But in the anime, he gets them out of nowhere and he can use them perfectly fine. It's so weird, and it just makes so much more sense here. But time runs out and the fight ends in a draw. This fight was actually surprisingly good, and it made both people look good. And Issei pulling out his dragon wings was a nice surprise. So Issei and Kiba take a break while Gasper keeps training. Issei reveals that he had a lot of power released to him during Juggernaut Drive, but he can't use it because he'll die. It's crazy how much this Juggernaut Drive messed Issei up. I didn't even realize how dangerous it was until I read this. Something again the anime brushed over was the danger and the impact of the Juggernaut Drive. And also he kind of just brushes over the fact that Issei really doesn't want to go Juggernaut ever again. Obviously he doesn't want to leave his friends behind, but he also doesn't want the kids to see him in that state. It's a really good dialogue we get between the characters because we get to see how much Issei has matured in just 6 months. It really is sad seeing how Issei is basically an adult now. He acts like one. And I also love how even though he's kind of matured as a person, he's still not a perfect fighter. He can pull out his wings, but he can't really use them. And he also can't even use his boosters to their full effect. They're still leaving much to be desired while also giving us some growth in Issei's character. Also, I just wanted to point out that Azazel made their training area. Azazel is just so good. But while Kiba and Issei are talking, Kiba reveals that him and Issei have already passed Rias and Akeno in terms of strength. And this is low-key one of my favorite reveals. I was like visibly shocked when I found this out. I love it, but at the same time it's kind of sad because Rias has way too much potential to be this weak. But at the same time, Issei and Kiba are the two characters that are the most believable to be stronger than Rias and Akeno. But we also get to know everyone's weaknesses during this conversation. Issei's weak without his balance breaker activated, and at the same time, when he has an increase in power, it's very easily detectable. So if he's in balance breaker form and his power increases, the enemy will know and all they have to do is run, and that'll cause Issei to run out of stamina. Kiba's weakness is his lack of defense, mainly in his legs. If someone were to attack his legs, he would be done. I really love this bonding moment between the male characters. This is something that I wish they did more in the anime, and it's just so nice to see these characters actually talking to each other and going over plans, going over future strategies. It's beautiful. While they're talking, Azazel comes in, and when I say Azazel steals the show, I mean Azazel steals the show in this volume. He acknowledges Issei's growth as a strategist because Issei and Kiba were talking about their future battle strategies, and he also brings up some really good points about Issei becoming a king. I think my favorite point was that Issei needs to learn when to abandon his pieces in a raiding game. Issei is super connected with his friends and would never let them be defeated, but that's something he'll have to learn in the future. It's an interesting point, and I wonder if Issei's actually gonna go this route, or if he's just gonna find another way of doing things. We also learned that Kiba actually has the deepest connection with his comrades, which was pretty surprising, and Azazel asks him if he would save Rias or Issei, and he says without hesitation Rias. And I'm hoping this leads into a future moment where Issei has to decide between two of his pieces, or two of his friends. Azazel also compares this sacrifice thing to what Sona did in the raiding game, how she kind of sacrificed Saji to give them a fighting chance. It's a perfect connection, and it also brings up another question: can Rias make that sacrifice? And that's also one of my favorite things this volume does. It makes you think. It makes you wonder, can Rias make that sacrifice? Can Issei make that sacrifice? Azazel also brings up a new weakness of Issei's, and that's his lust. An opponent can use that against him. And at this point, it feels like they're just getting ready for the raiding game with Cyberorg. The whole Loki thing really hasn't even been hinted at. It's so crazy. So they decide to keep training, but before they do, Azazel pulls Issei to the side and says that he's leaving Akeno in Issei's hands. He realizes that Issei is the only person that can help Akeno through her trauma, and I think that Azazel's involvement with Akeno's backstory is so beautiful. It's beautiful, but it's also sad. He feels guilty because he's the reason that Barkil wasn't at Akeno's house when her mom got killed. Azazel is such a complex character. He hides his actual feelings behind a mask, and we only get little hints of what he's really like. And that's one of the reasons why I like him so much. But Azazel switches the topic to the Juggernaut Drive and kind of hints at Issei's Cardinal Crimson promotion. He tells Issei to approach the Juggernaut Drive in a different way and suggests that he talks to the previous users and get them to chill out. He wants Issei to calm that hatred that's in their heart. And this is the only time that this Azazel explaining things feels forced. I really wish we got this explanation from Drake instead. I think it would make a lot more sense. And I think that sometimes they need to switch up who explains these plot points. Because at this point right here, it kind of feels like Azazel's just switching between topics and just trauma dumping plot points on top of us. But overall, this scene was really good, and it was one of my favorite scenes. I love the bonding between the characters. I just think that that last point that Azazel had with the Juggernaut Drive should have been said by someone else. Later on, Odin and the bodyguard team are out flying in this like Norse horse wagon thing when it suddenly stopped out of nowhere. Everyone goes out to see what's happening, and that's when the man, the myth, and the legend shows up. Loki appears out of nowhere. It's such a surprising reveal, and I can just imagine the shock from the people who didn't know this was going to happen. Again, they hint so much at the So-So and Cyberorg things, but they don't say anything about Loki. So he just comes out of nowhere, and it makes for a legitimate surprise. So Azazel approaches Loki first, and Azazel kind of has that Rias aura to him, where he's always the leader of the group no matter what group he's in. So Azazel and Loki kind of go back and forth, and we find out that Loki hates the other factions because they spread the Bible across the world, making the Norse gods less important. And we also find out that Loki actually isn't even in the Chaos Brigade, which was pretty surprising, but makes a lot more sense. So Loki directs his killing intent at Odin, and everyone there can feel it. Even I could feel it. It was a pretty intimidating moment, but everybody attacks Loki. Zenobia, Kiba, and Idina try, but he doesn't feel any of their attacks. Issei goes balance breaker, and since he can't fly, he gives the control of his wings to Drake, and Drake does the flying. Loki and Issei fight for a little bit, but Loki completely outmatches Issei, and it's not even close. And at this point, I was kind of just wondering why Odin doesn't just go out there and fight himself. I mean, I assume he's still one of the strongest Norse gods, but then guess what? My question doesn't even matter anymore, because Loki summons probably the strongest character we've seen, besides for Ophis, Great Red, and like Sir Zex. Loki brings Fenrir into the battle, and Fenrir has aura. And I don't mean Rias aura, I mean like aura. He makes everyone freeze up. Nobody can move when he enters the fight. That's how strong he is. Even Azazel was afraid of him. While they're frozen, Loki tells Fenrir to kill Rias since she's Sir Zek's sister. But while Fenrir is moving at like god speed to try to kill Rias, Issei's body moves on its own and protects her. And this is actually another great moment. This is probably the closest I've ever been to thinking Rias was ever gonna die. And it's actually a nice callback to the conversation that Issei had with Kiba, where he said he would protect Rias at the risk of his own life. And Fenrir messes Issei up pretty badly. Kiba grabs him and takes him to Asya, and we get a nice little moment where Loki is kind of scared of Issei, more of his potential because he was able to block Fenrir's moves. And because of that fear, he tells Fenrir to attack Issei and kill him. But Azazel and Barkil step in before that happens, and they start fighting Loki. We find out that Norse magic is stronger than religious magic, so Loki can easily defend himself from everyone else. Loki gets Fenrir ready again, and basically everyone is in front of Issei and Rias trying to protect them. But before Fenrir can even attack, you won't even believe who steps in to save the day. The volley Lucifer comes in and saves Issei. Such an amazing reveal. I loved it. I got so excited. I was going crazy for this moment. I was on the edge of my seat reading this volume. Volley uses half dimension, but Fenrir just bites right through it. It's just so insane how strong Fenrir is. And then Loki just decides to retreat since Volley joined the fight, and Issei passes out. Issei wakes up in the wagon thing and hears Volley talking to everyone, and then Volley says that the only way they can defeat Loki is if all of them work together. This is what I've been dying to see, a team up between Issei and Volley. What a chapter. This is probably my favorite chapter so far, and Volley completely stole the show at the end. And it's crazy how much hype this fight had around it. Everyone's gathered at Issei's house, the Grimmery team, Idina, Azazel, Barkil, Roswaisa, Odin, the Seeker team, and the Volley team. And they're all discussing what to do about Loki, and they decide to protect Odin, but they have to do it with just them because the other people are dealing with the Chaos Brigade. Loki is a problem, but Fenrir is the big problem that they're having. Fenrir is so intimidating in this volume, and I just love it. They should have done a way better job at conveying this in the anime. It's so intense. Fenrir just has so much aura. So for some reason, Rias was leading the group for a second, and she asks why Volley is helping them, and Volley says he wants to fight them because they're strong. Azazel and Volley have a nice back and forth moment, and I also love these interactions with Azazel and Volley. Azazel was so hurt by Volley betraying him, and I really felt bad for him when that happened. But they move on to the plan against Loki, and Azazel said he's going to ask someone for plans against Loki, and the person he was going to ask is the Midgard serpent. That thing that they fought in the anime, that big dragon, wasn't even a villain. I thought this whole time that dude was a bad guy. To summon the serpent, Azazel needs the two heavenly dragons, Vritra, Tanin, and Fafnir. So I guess Tanin is joining the team now. This buildup is so crazy. It's like they're going to war. It's so interesting. Everyone that we know is coming together to fight a god and his pet dog. But Azazel and Barkil go to get Tanin, and everyone else just kind of interacts with each other. Rias and Biko go back and forth. She hates him since he gave her the name of Switch Princess. Issei and Asya thank Volley for saving her, and Issei and Kuroka kind of go back and forth. A pretty funny scene at the end there, but the plan and the build-up for the fight was just so phenomenally done. The dragons all get teleported to talk to the serpent, and Saji's so nervous about meeting Tanin because he's an ultimate class devil. And we also get to learn what an ultimate class devil really is. So it says ultimate class devils are ranks that only chosen ones can become in the underworld. The current top 10 rankers in the rating game are all ultimate class devils, and to reach that rank, the amount of contribution, the results in the game, and your ability are what make you an ultimate class devil. And for devils, it's the best ranking there is apparently. So Azazel summons the Midgard serpent, and Issei says he's bigger than Great Red, which is insane. And we also find out that Loki made him too, which is so crazy to think about, that Loki made him and Fenrir. He really is a mastermind. He created one of the strongest beings and one of the Dragon Kings. Azazel asks the serpent for Loki and Fenrir's weaknesses, and he says that Fenrir's is the chain of Gleipnir and Loki's is Mjolnir. So now that they got that information, they can head back and start planning for the fight. Azazel gets a copy of Mjolnir that apparently Odin was hiding, and Issei's given Mjolnir. When Issei puts his aura into it, it becomes really big and heavy, and he can't even lift it. But in balance breaker form, he's able to pick it up. We get a nice little moment where Vali says he doesn't need an extra weapon, and Issei gets jealous of him. And this is kind of the beginnings of a new goal for Issei to surpass Vali. Azazel also talks to Biko, and he tells Biko that Wukong and Yulong are mad at him because he became a terrorist. This is also a really funny scene, and it also clears up a question that I had about if Wukong knew who Biko was. And Biko's actually pretty funny. Biko also warns Vali about Wukong, and Wukong is just such a beast, even Vali can't even beat him. So later on, Azazel explains the plan. The plan is to lure Loki into the meeting with Odin. Then the Seichiri group will transfer Loki, Fenrir, and everyone else to the battle spot. And then Vali and Issei will fight Loki, while the Grimmery team and the Vali team will fight Fenrir and capture him with the chains of Gleipnir. And of course, Odin's staying back because he's the target. Azazel also makes it known that Saji is a key part of the battle, and he takes Saji to the Fallen Angel's place to train. Issei gives Saji some words of advice. He says, "Saji, Sensei's training is hell. I almost died in the underworld as well. On top of that, you are going to the Laboratory Institute. You are dead." And I love this. This is so funny. Saji started freaking out, but I love that he's being used. And I love that he's still being an important factor in the fights. Azazel is obviously just trying to awaken Vritra inside of Saji, but a little bit later we get another funny scene between Drake and Albion. They have a funny back and forth, and they both cry over Issei ruining both of their reputations. And Vali asks Issei how to comfort Albion, and Issei just says he doesn't know. The dragons are done so much better in the light novel. They're actually involved in these characters' lives. I don't know why they kind of just take a backseat in the anime, but it's so disappointing. Later on, Rias and Issei continue planning, and then Grafia enters the room to give Rias some documents. And while Rias and Grafia are talking, Issei asks them about Akino's backstory. Grafia and Rias tell Issei the backstory, and it's so sad. Rias does an amazing job at explaining it and adding emotional commentary to it. And just to recap, Barkil was wounded in a battle, and Akino's mom picked him up and took care of him. He decided to stay there with Akino's mom, and eventually they had a daughter, Akino obviously. Akino lived a very happy life with their family until Barkil got a call from Azazel. He left out to go to Azazel, but while he was gone, some people attacked their house. Akino's mom's family thought that she had been brainwashed by the fallen angels, so they sent some people over to try to kill Barkil, and I guess Akino too. But obviously Barkil wasn't there to fend them off, and Akino only had her mom to protect her, and her mom did end up dying protecting her. And luckily Barkil was able to come back before they got to Akino. But obviously enough damage had been done psychologically to Akino to where she holds a grudge against all fallen angels, since the only reason her mom died was because she was with the fallen angel. It's a really sad backstory that makes you feel for both Barkil and Akino. And this whole Akino backstory is just so well done here. It's so emotional and so sad, and I think it's done a lot better in the light novel. A little later, we get a one-on-one with Issei and Azazel reveals that he feels guilty for Akino's trauma since he called Barkil out. This whole scene just makes you feel so bad for Azazel. He carries so much guilt on him, and again, we get to see a different side of him through this conversation. This volume was an Azazel masterclass. He was easily the best character in this volume. But while they're talking, Vali enters the room and reveals that he learned Norse magic. Azazel leaves the room and we get a one-on-one between Issei and Vali. And this, of course, was also a really good moment. Vali and Issei bond over their goals. Vali wants to just be the strongest person in the world, while Issei wants to become his own king / harem king. But Issei also reveals a new goal that he has, to surpass Vali. And this makes Vali so happy. He becomes all excited, and then they promise to fight each other. Honestly, I think by the end of the series, Vali should end up being stronger than Issei. I think it makes more sense, and I think it'll be better for the character, since this is like Vali's only goal, while Issei has other things that he can strive for. So if I were to pick who I think should win the ultimate battle between the two, I would pick Vali. While they're bonding, Odin interrupts and asks Vali what part of the body he likes the most, and Vali says hips, and that was pretty funny. But Odin also has a moment of realization. He says that Loki was created because of his pride. He feels sad that he's making these young devils clean up his mess. Issei gives Odin some words of motivation, and Odin seems pretty satisfied by it. Overall, a pretty good scene. Again, the character bonding moments are always really good. They're very important. They make characters more interesting. We get to know about these characters, which makes us care about the characters more, which improves the quality of the story. It really is essential to have characters that you can either relate to or characters that you like. We get another amazing scene after this. If you can, I 100% recommend you going and reading this part of the story right now. You don't have to read the whole thing, just read this part. It's on chapter 3, part 6, and the thing I'm reading on, it's page 146. This will have you feeling completely different about Issei. I say this because the way I'm going to explain it is going to be like a simplified version of it. So if you can, I 100% recommend reading that. Issei is in his room trying to talk to the previous possessors of the sacred gear when Akeno comes in. So Akeno comes in and tries to have sex with Issei, but Issei looks at her in the eyes and sees that her eyes are lifeless. When he sees this, he rejects her. And then Issei says that usually when she's doing ecchi things, she's smiling, but right now she looks sad. And Issei just hugs Akeno and comforts her. And this is easily the best scene we've seen with Issei and a girl. This scene like really put me on to Issei. This scene made me feel like Issei is a legit main character, and this scene makes me think that him and Akeno would actually make for a great couple. It's so beautiful. Someone as perverted as Issei rejects Akeno not because of Rainer's trauma, not because he was too scared, but from his own free will. He doesn't want to take advantage of her in that moment. It's such an amazing scene that you have to read for yourself to really understand it. Issei says that he'll always be there for Akeno, and this really seems to cheer her up. Later that night, Issei's in bed with Rias, and she can just tell that Issei's really scared about the fight. I love how realistic Issei feels in this volume. This is the most powerful person he's fought so far, and I think anyone would be scared in this situation. He feels like a real person, and he has such a gentle soul, it's crazy. And Issei and Rias just have so much chemistry. They can just read each other's thoughts, and I love it. The relationship building in this volume was peak. This was legit one of the best chapters I've read of anything. We got to know so many characters. It was done so well. Azazel, Vali, Akeno, Issei, all of these characters were so good in this volume. We got to learn who they really were. So they decided to go back to school for one last time. I don't know why they would want to do that. And they hint at the school festival again. But we get a scene where Rias and Akeno kind of get competitive with each other because they were talking about who the most popular member was. And this is really the first time we see Akeno happy since the date with Issei. So it was a pretty nice moment. But the bell rings and it's time for them to go off into battle. And Azazel drops one of the hardest lines in high school DxD. He says this: "It's too early for a Ragnarok. You guys were going all out." What a banger. Just Azazel being Azazel. So it's finally time for the battle. And Azazel stays back to protect Odin, so Barkil's there to replace Azazel. The tension is at an all-time high, and I just couldn't wait to get it started. Loki attacks the meeting directly, and then he falls right into their trap. He gets teleported to the designated fighting area, and Issei and Vali go balance breaker immediately. And they fight Loki while everyone else is fighting Fenrir. Issei and Vali attack Loki at the same time, and Loki is really able to hold his own against both of them. It's kind of crazy how strong he is. In this fight, we really get to see the difference in strength between Issei and Vali. Vali is using a bunch of different types of techniques, while Issei is just using his fists and other basic attacks. There's a massive skill gap between the two, but Loki's easily able to fight the two of them, so Issei pulls out Mjolnir, and when Loki sees it, he actually gets pretty scared. I think it's funny how he's always scared of Mjolnir no matter what story he's in, but Issei tries to hit Loki with Mjolnir, but he can't activate its power. So Mjolnir has like Thor's thunder inside of it, and that's what makes it really strong. But to activate that, you have to be worthy. And to be worthy, you have to have a pure heart, and you have to be really, really strong. And I guess because of Issei's perversion, Mjolnir doesn't see him as worthy. Loki pulls Fenrir out, but before Fenrir can really do anything, Kuroka pulls out the chains of Gleipnir, and everyone comes together to catch Fenrir. And they actually succeed, which was something I was pretty surprised about. I was like, wow, Fenrir didn't put up any type of fight, but that'll come back later. So Fenrir got trapped, but Loki doesn't seem worried at all, and that's because he summons two more dogs, Fenrir's children, Hati and Skull. The two dogs attack everyone, but while that's happening, Vali's actually able to get a few hits in on Loki, and they fight for a little bit. We find out that Vali can't use his divide on Loki because he can't use divine dividing on god-class beings or people stronger than him. Issei then helps Vali fight Loki, and he sends a dragon shot at Loki. And Loki actually acknowledges the dragon shot, and he says that he can't underestimate Issei. And he becomes really worried about Issei's transfer ability. So I like that Loki's acknowledging Issei, and we're getting more into Issei's potential, because it does make you want to see more from Issei and his power. But I wish we would get a little bit of acknowledgement from Vali. I mean, he basically lives to fight strong people. I think it would also make sense for Loki to say like Vali's really strong too. But because Loki's worried about Issei using his transfer ability, he decides to focus on Issei. So he directs all his attacks on Issei. But Volley doesn't like this at all. He doesn't like being ignored. So he gathers a bunch of power to hit Loki with. But before he can do anything, you won't even believe what happens. Fenrir comes in and eats Volley. Like, what a shocking moment. I did not see it coming at all. I thought Fenrir was done. I thought they had already captured him. So apparently, one of the dogs was able to get Fenrir free. And it's just like, what is everyone else doing? Were they just watching Issei and Volley fight the whole time? But this moment was so crazy, bro. I like jumped up and I was like, oh my god. So Fenrir has Volley like in his mouth, and Issei and Tannin both try saving Volley, but Fenrir destroys both of them, forcing them to use their Phoenix Tears. And at this point, Issei's starting to consider going Juggernaut Drive, but he decides to hold back. Loki then summons some Midgard serpent clones, and I think this is what they're supposed to be fighting in season 3. That's what that thing's supposed to be. But he summons multiple, but these things are way weaker than the actual one, so Tannin's able to wipe some of them out pretty easily. At the same time, the Grimmery team is focused on one of the dogs, and we get some nice teamwork from them. This fight really does a good job at making sure everyone looks good. They all got their little moments against the dog, and it didn't drag on for too long. Honestly, it could have gone on longer and it would have been better. But yeah, they're holding their own against it. Kiba's able to get some cuts in. Konoko's able to use her special technique against it, but they're kind of still struggling. On the other hand, you have the Volley team taking on the other dog, and they're able to take it on way easier. Kind of like with Issei and Volley, there's a clear strength gap in between Volley's team and Issei's team. I do wonder what a matchup between them would look like, but we cut back to Volley while he's being eaten by Fenrir. He starts doing the Juggernaut Drive chant. This is such a crazy moment. Volley is so good in this series. I love every fight he's in. Again, this moment had me going crazy. Juggernaut Drive while being eaten, like, oh my god. Now there is a little problem here. So Volley tells Kuroka to transfer him to a different place and also transfer the chains with him, and she does, but we don't get to see Volley again after that. I was so disappointed when they didn't show the actual fight between Volley and Fenrir. They really fumbled not putting that in there. It was such a shame. And it's even more disappointing when you find out that Volley wins that fight and captures Fenrir. Like, why wouldn't you show that? That's like the perfect thing to put in there. That would have made it so much better. But Volley leaves the fight, leaving Issei with Loki in a one-on-one. But while all that is happening, one of the dogs tries to attack Akeno, and Barkil protects her. Unfortunately, Barkil did get bit by the dog, and we get a nice moment between Akeno and Barkil, where it seems like Akeno has mixed feelings about her dad. Issei wants to know how she really feels about him, because it kind of seems like she's just using her dad as a way to cope, and Issei wants to figure that out, so he uses Booby Lingual and reads her thoughts, or tries to read her thoughts. And then we get my only big problem with this volume. So while trying to read her thoughts, Issei hears a voice coming from her boobs. And this voice isn't Akeno's, it's the voice of a boob god from another dimension. And this is just so out of place, and it really isn't necessary at all. I think it kind of ruins the moment between Akeno and Barkil, and there was definitely a better way of doing this. But the god takes Issei, Akeno, and Barkil into Akeno's past, and we legitimately get an emotional scene with Akeno in her past. Her mom comes out and tells Akeno that Barkil loves her, and Akeno and Barkil are able to make up. It really is a beautiful scene that had me feeling emotional. But again, it's kind of ruined by the boob god thing. They get back to the fight and Issei starts glowing. So the boob god blessed him and is now protecting him from Mjolnir's judgment, so Issei can now access the thunder inside of Mjolnir. And I think this is really dumb. You could have done this same exact thing without the boob god. It messes up the tone because this is just impossible to take serious. And also, I think it would have made for a better scene if Mjolnir would have realized that Issei had a pure heart through this whole interaction with Akeno and her backstory. It's kind of dumb, but the god also gives Issei some power, and Loki seems pretty interested in it and summons some more serpents. But before the serpents can do anything, my boy Saji comes in clutch and attacks the serpents with his black flames. Saji just came back from his training and is noticeably stronger. So they put every Vritra type sacred gear onto Saji, and at this moment Saji is in an uncontrolled state, but he is able to tell friend from foe. Basically, Vritra woke up inside of Saji, and these black flames that Saji has are no joke. The serpents can't escape them, and even Loki was struggling to escape them. And I love this. Like I said in the last volume, they need to do everything they can to not drop the ball with Saji, and this is a great way of doing that. Saji's like a completely different person here. He's such a beast. So they attack the defenseless serpents, and then Issei charges at Loki with his hammer. Loki tries to blast away Issei, but Issei just eats all the attacks. Then for a second, Loki actually does break free from the flames and tries to escape, but Akeno and Barkul both hit him with their holy lightning, and this stuns him for a second. Then Issei transfers his power to Mjolnir and uses the thunder to finish Loki off. And before Loki passes out, he asks why God would create something that can kill other gods. And I love this, like, what a statement going out. So Loki passes out, and then all the other monsters are defeated at the same time. This fight was so good, especially the ending. Barkul and Akeno ending the fight is so perfect. There's no other way you should have done that. It shows that they finally are united, and Akeno finally forgives her dad. And then of course the inclusion of Saji is just so perfect too. And I can't wait to see what Saji does next. He's actually a character I care about now. So Saji wakes up later to Issei calling his name, and then they share a nice little moment together. You know, Saji kind of sees Issei like how Issei sees Volley. So it's nice that they're sharing moments together just like Issei and Volley do. Issei then shares another good moment with Barkul, where Barkul asks Issei if he likes Akeno, and obviously Issei does, and Barkul finally accepts Issei. And man, I really love how they do Akeno in this volume. This is so well done. This is what I want to see from her. This is that potential that I'm talking about when I said that Akeno at her best is one of the best characters. I hate when they have Akeno doing nothing like they did in season 1 and season 4 of High School DxD. She's way too important and has way too much potential as a character to just be sitting there doing nothing. Everyone goes home after their massive victory, and overall I would definitely say this is my favorite fight. Like, everything was good about it. The tension was definitely the best thing about this fight though. The whole time I was going crazy trying to figure out what was going to happen next. The Volley Juggernaut drive scene was crazy, Volley getting eaten by Fenrir was crazy, and the aura built around Loki and Fenrir was insane. I never thought these two were this strong. I mean, I knew Fenrir was this strong, but I didn't know Loki was this strong. It was such an amazing fight, and honestly, Loki probably just moved up on my villains list. I will also acknowledge Fenrir as an interesting character, and I kind of want to see more from him. I also love how everyone got a spotlight in this fight, especially Akeno, Barkul, Issei, Volley. The characters that we care about most in this volume got their spotlight. This is so much better than the anime fight. The anime fight's not bad, but it's not this. They should have just done this. So we cut to the hero faction and we get some dialogue about them, and they say that the dragon emperors are both problems, but then it's also revealed that they found one of the dragon slayers, which is a weapon they can use to beat all the strong dragons. It's basically just more hinting on the So-So fight. We then switch to Volley's perspective, who was able to capture Fenrir and make him his pet using Arthur's sword, but the sword only allows the person to have a fraction of their power, so Fenrir is massively nerfed now, which is a shame. Volley did so good in that fight. I can't wait to see more Volley fights. We switch to Azazel's perspective, and Surzex is thanking him for saving the world again. I mean, at this point, Azazel has saved the world like a million times, but Surzex says that he's raising the ranks of Issei, Kiba, and Akeno. They're going to become mid-ranking devils, and I don't really know about Akeno yet. Even when they were naming the reasons why they're being promoted, Issei's was that he was the Red Dragon Emperor, he's very popular in the underworld. Kiba's reasoning was because he had the holy demonic sword, and his power is a mystery. And then Akeno's is just, she's Barkul's daughter. It's kind of a strange choice, but I guess it makes sense since she is the queen. We also get some more hero faction information, revealing that they're farming balance breakers. And then we cut back to the ORC. So back in the club room, Odin had returned home, but he forgot to take Roswisa with him. Rias really liked what she saw from Roswisa in the fight, so she decided to bribe her into joining the peerage. And with that, Rias has a full team. Rias, Akeno, Konako, Roswisa, Kiba, Zenobia, Gasper, Asya, and Issei. Everyone welcomes Roswisa to the group, and then Akeno gives Issei some food that she made him. It then does the fake little food on the lip kiss thingy, and then we get like a funny little moment where everyone gets jealous of that kiss. It was a nice little way to end it, and it was a cute little scene. And then we get another perspective switch to Azazel, where he's with Barkul, and Azazel gives Barkul a bento that Akeno made for him, and Barkul just sits there eating it while crying. And this is such a beautiful scene. I mean, we watched Barkul lose everything. He lost his wife, and then he lost his daughter. So seeing it all come back to him, and seeing him reunited with his only family member is just so beautiful. It was so touching. And then to add to it, Azazel drops my favorite line in this entire volume. Maybe my favorite line in the entire series. This line like actually almost made me cry. He said, "Issei, I couldn't say this in front of you, but I also feel like I was saved Saved by You as well. This is so perfect, so emotional, and I just love seeing this side of Azazel. And I love how it's just subtly hinted at. He's such an interesting character, it leaves you wanting a whole series about him. Azazel will forever be my GOAT. But I do have a nitpick about this ending here, and that's that the volume should have ended with that Azazel line right there. That is the perfect place to end that volume. But instead we cut to Soso, and he's just planning the attack on Kyoto, and then the volume ends right there. This is probably one of my favorite books ever. This is by far my favorite volume, and everything in it was just so good. The story was interesting, it was suspenseful, and oh my god, the characters were amazing. I always say the characters are the most important thing in a story, because if we don't care about the characters, we don't care about anything else. And man, these characters are all so good. We care about all of them. Akino's story was phenomenal. Azazel got a lot of moments that wanted us to see more of him. We got to see a different side of him. Volley stole the show in all the fights he was in. And Issei is such an amazing person in this volume. I can finally root for Issei no matter what now. These are the 4 characters that I say put on a masterclass. The best 4 characters in this volume would definitely be Akino, Volley, Issei, and Azazel. I don't really have that many complaints other than the boob god thing. Other than that goofiness, this volume was perfect. Overall, I give the MVP award to Azazel. Again, I think he just stole the show every time he was there. He was such an interesting character. He did so much in this volume. And my favorite moment was definitely the Loki fight. So much tension was being built, and there was so much aura in that fight, it was crazy. And for an overall score, I'll give this volume a 9.3 out of 10. And I just can't wait to get into the next volume. I was gonna do a proper ending, but I just can't. So last night it was announced that the creator of Dragon Ball, Akira Toriyama, just died. And I don't even know what to say. Hearing that, I mean, it was just like hearing my childhood just died. I grew up on Dragon Ball, so that really hurt a lot when I heard that. You can't even put into words how influential that man was. I mean, this channel wouldn't even exist without him. High School DxD wouldn't exist without him. I wouldn't even like anime if it wasn't for him. Do you know how crazy it is being an American, watching Dragon Ball, and thinking Dragon Ball was an American show? That's crazy. That's how big and influential he was. So hearing that he had just passed away, it really hurt a lot. I really don't know what to say. He really changed so many lives. I mean, all I can say is just rest in peace. And your legacy will live on forever. No one will ever forget you.